when you are looking at a different culture than your own, you've got to look at that through their perspective and not yours. Because when you look at it through your perspective, then you're being ethnocentric. And this is disrespectful. Okay? This is unhealthy communication. Now, in the Lakota way, we don't really have husband wife kind of situation. Now, to me, that idea was created by man for the sole purpose of controlling the woman, to subdue the woman, that she's property of the man. I mean, you look at Western societies that practice marriage, and you look at their histories, and in many of these countries, including America, women did not have the right to vote. They did not have the right to own property. In many cases, they were not allowed to go to the same schools or universities as men. So they were not allowed to be doctors. They were not allowed to be government leaders. Yeah, you see what I mean? And so that's why I said, to me, that idea is a man-made idea. And in the Lakota world, it's not like that. Yeah, basically, when um, I remember talking about this before the we had our 18-day break. Yeah, I remember talking about marriage. That we don't really have that in our culture. Um, it's different. Yeah, there's no marriage ceremony. Today, a lot of Lakota people, they create one. Yeah, they use the pipe and all these kind of things, and dress in white. Now, where do you think that's coming from? Dressing in white. That's not our culture. Yeah, we didn't have that. Not at all. Usually, what happened is that when a man and woman are ready for it, and they do fall in love with each other, basically, basically, I keep saying that all the time. What happens is that most of the time the man might start it. Yeah, he might say to her, "Hey, I really like being with you. Maybe we should live together." Yeah, um, and maybe he says, kung ya chink del ho." No, he's being serious. Yeah. Just you want to be together, just and if she agrees, then she'll say, yeah, okay. So then they go talk to their families. They tell them of their intentions. Yeah. And so after that, they go before the council, the government, and then they say, this is what this couple wants to do. And so the government, the councils will say, yeah, is everybody okay with this? And they say, yeah, okay, all right. So then, so be it. So they want to make sure there's not going to be a problem, because the people were community minded thinking. Yeah, today we're individualistic thinking. Even on the reservation, we're this way. We're not like our ancestors anymore, and I will explain that later. Okay. But back then, they were community thinking, so everything has to be, the camp is more important. The group is more important. than the individual. Okay, so I mean, actually, they're both important. So I think the better way to say it is that the individual is not more important. Okay, that the camp, the group, the family, and the individual, they're all important. Okay, so you don't put one over the other because that's oppression. All right. So everything is cool. Then they say, okay. And in our society, we have a really, really, really old Lakota Star Knowledge story that explains why um, the home belongs to the woman. So because of this, and anthropologists came to our people, they thought we were matriarchal. Yeah, because of that. But then there's other aspects of our culture that are not matriarchal. So early anthropologists, they didn't know which one we were. Actually, we were a third one. Yeah, we're not matriarchal. We're not patriarchal either. Yeah, a little bit later I'm going to talk about when the reservation first started. Okay, now during that time period we became Christian. At that time period we became patriarchal. Then in the 60s and 70s and so forth, people started to try to be traditional. So then they were saying they're matriarchal. But the problem is that they were looking at the ceremonies through Christian influenced eyes. So it's still not like the ancestral view. Okay. So again, in the early reservation times, most people were patriarchal. Then as we come towards the 1950s, 60s, some people are starting to head down the matriarchal way. Either way, they're missing the point. Yeah. Either way, they're on the wrong boat. Yeah. They can't comprehend that there is actually a third option. And that third option is what our ancestors were. Okay? So, in this way, the ancestral way, when the couple goes through all of this, to make sure everybody's cool with this and all that, then the a certain maybe the warrior society that the man is from, maybe his society is going to build the teepee. Yeah, that they put they get the buffalo, and the women folks work on the hides and stuff like that to make the teepee covering, and the men chop the wood for the to make the teepee poles and so forth, and the women folks put it up, and they say, okay, this is the home of this couple, but it belongs to the woman, and it's understood. That's the Lakota way. And so they just made this announcement. These two are standing here. They're going to live together and have a good life. And we wish them good health and children, strong, healthy children, and everything. Wow, for this family. Because when they are well, we are well. You see what I mean? See how that works? A community-minded thinking perspective. And that's it. There's no, putting rings on each other's fingers. There's no, uh, do you take so and so to be your awful wedded husband through sickness and then health and all that hoopity hoppity blue hoo hoo and whatever. There's nothing like that exists in our society. Yeah, our ways are really based on nature. So this is the only thing they did, and that was it. Yeah. Then they go into their teepee, and everybody hollers and celebrates. Wow, the community is gonna grow, meaning they're gonna have children later. it's the societies are going to, grow as well, So, um, and also they know that maybe somebody will, there's old people, so they might die too. So they do this so that people may live. You see what I mean? So that's how it works. Just a side note here. Sometimes in movies you will see like when a group of Indians is moving really fast in the winter time or something like that, and and the old people are slowing them down. Then you see them put the old people out into the blizzard to die. This is false. That doesn't exist anywhere. Yeah, this is really not our way. If I know there was a TV series in the 1970s called Centennial. I wonder if any of you remember that. Yeah, uh, there were white guys playing Indians in the movie. It's typical. That's what typically happens. Uh, but it was okay. But this lots of things were wrong, and this was one of them. That we didn't put old people out there like that. Just let them die. It's not our way. Movies are just movies. They're full of shit. It's entertainment. It's not the truth. Okay? So, anywho, so back to my story here. So this couple, now they're there. That was the extent. Yeah, that was the extent of it. So it was to stay together. Now sometimes maybe this girl has a sister, and maybe they're getting up there in age. Maybe they're in their 50s and 60s and so forth, and uh, and then maybe the sister, maybe her husband dies for whatever reason. Now she's alone. See, we don't like that in our culture. We don't want people to feel lonesome. So the 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 sister uh, of this couple I'm talking about, that got married, okay? This The married sister, she might talk to her husband and she'll say, "My sister's husband is, that he died, and she's kind of feeling lonesome right now. I would like her to stay with us. Is that okay with you?" And then he will go, "Yeah, yeah. I don't want her to feel lonesome either. Yeah, it's not good to feel lonesome. Yeah, it's just not good." He says, "Yeah, let's go talk to her." So they'll go talk to her and they'll say, "Yeah, we'd like you to live with us. Stay with us." And the husband will say, "And I'll provide for you too." He says, "Don't worry." He says, "You'll always be taken care of." If she still has kids, because sometimes maybe the woman is in her 30s and her husband was killed in a battle, okay, and so she still has children. So the husband of the sister, he will say to this woman, "I'll take care of your kids too." Because in the Tioshpai way, this can work. Now, let me explain that real fast. A Tioshpai is a group of people. Usually they're related to each other, but sometimes a Tioshpai will include people who are not part of the family, but they share a common identity somehow. And this group is Oshpaye, yeah. And then T means to live at, to dwell. And so put them together, you get Tioshpaye. There's a group that lives together. Yeah, they have something in common. Most of them are going to be relatives, but there's others going to be included, that are not relatives, but they share something in common in their identity. Okay? Now, in a Tioshpai, I'm going to use you as an example. Your mother and her sisters are all your mothers, and they're all equally important to you. The men who are with these women, those are all your fathers, and all those fathers are equally important to you too. And the children from all these unions, these children are your brothers and sisters. Your mother's brothers, those are your uncles. And the women they're with, those are your aunts. And the children from those people, those are your cousins. Okay? Now let's go to your father's side. Your father and his brothers are your other fathers, and they're all equally important. The women who are with these men are your other mothers. The children from these people are your other brothers and sisters. Now, your father's sisters, those are your aunts. And the men they live with, those are your uncles, your other uncles. And the children from that group are your other cousins. So this is a Tioshpai. Okay? So you got a lot of mothers, a lot of fathers, lots of brothers and sisters. So when you address each other, you don't use your name. You address each other by how you are related to them. So you're either going to be saying cousin, brother, sister, or whatever, auntie, uncle, you know what I mean? Nephew, niece, and so forth, son, daughter. So you're going to use kinship terms when you talk to each other. The names are only used for ceremonial reasons. I was talking about that 2 nights ago. Or was I talking about that last night? Anyway, I think that was last night. Okay, this is a Tioshpai. All right, so now let's look at the story again. Okay, that I'm telling here. You have a man and woman. They're going to live. They're living together now. The woman's sister in this story, her man is dead. Maybe he died in a battle or something. Okay, but she's alone and she still has children. Okay, so from that first married couple, the woman might say to her man, "I'd like my I'd like it if I don't want my sister to feel left out and I don't want her to feel lonesome. So I would like it if she could stay with us if that's okay with you." And usually the man is like, "Yeah, sure, yeah, that's no problem," because see, they're thinking of the whole group. The children need guidance, yeah, and so that they might, so they will go invite the sister to come live with them, and if she has children, so she can bring her children too, and that's the way they live. So this was not about romance, okay? So this was not about a man who is having sex with two women. It's not about that at all, okay? So it's really not polygamy because there's no sex. Yeah, and it's not romantic love. It's more like brother sister love. All right. So by the time these people get old, you usually a lot of times you'll see a Lakota older Lakota man with three, four, wives. They think they're wives, but actually they're not. So in the books they say, yeah, Sitting Bull had 6 wives. And they make it look like it's polygamy. But really, it's not. Yeah, it isn't. It has nothing to do with romance. It has nothing to do with romantic love. It has nothing to do with sex. It's about taking care of people. Yeah, to feel um what's that word? Unconditional love. Yeah, that's that's what it's all about. So um, when you see these pictures in historical books or something, and you say, "Oh, Chief so and so had four wives," and that's really um, not correct. It was not polygamy. Yeah, it was not polygamy, and they have to get permission too. You can't just do it because you feel like it. You have to go before the council, and then the council asks everybody. Just like how that when the man and woman, when they started to live together, they do the same thing again when they bring in another person. So it's not a marriage. So if it's not a marriage, then it's not a wife. See? Do you see what I mean? So this was not polygamy. Not at all. So I need to say that because a lot of people think, they think everything is written in books, and that's baloney. Most of the things that you read in books are incorrect. Most of them are incorrect. So this was the case with Sitting Bull. Yeah, it's the same situation. So this my friend Erin, that was one of the questions she asked me because she knows that books have a lot of false information. And so she wanted to, hear from me, because uh, she just felt that, that didn't make sense. That Sitting Bull is this really wise man, um, and when the books say he had six wives, she didn't believe it. See, it doesn't fit, she said. And I said, you're right, it doesn't, and you are correct. I said because our view is when a man and woman live together, it's because they love each other. Yeah. So it's not about marrying each other. It's about living together. And then sometimes people change. So then they just, okay, they announce it. We're not living together anymore. We're not perfect people. Yeah. Sometimes maybe the man is lazy. Maybe he's not doing anything. So then the woman will take his belongings and put them outside the teepee door. That's showing the community they're not living together anymore. So when he comes home and sees that, then he's, oh, gee. And see, remember, she's the ruler of the household. So there's no argument. So he just has to get his things and go find someplace else to live because it's over. Some people will call that divorce. Technically, since we didn't have marriage, then we didn't have divorce either. See how that works in our society. And sometimes it might be the other way around. Yeah, that maybe it's the woman who's becoming selfish and vain, and maybe the husband doesn't like that. and so he will take her and tell her and her female relatives to fix her up nicely, and then he will walk her through the camp, and as he's walking her through the camp, he's saying, "We're not together anymore." Then when we got horses, he would put her on his best horse and walk her around, and he would say, "We're not together anymore." Yeah, that's the ancient way. When you have marriage in the Western way, you create all kinds of stress that is unnatural. Yeah? You don't need that. That's a man made idea that benefits the man and not necessarily the woman. And in ancient Lakota society, like I said, we're not patriarchal, but we're not matriarchal either. So the idea of marriage does not make sense, as well as divorce. So you live together as long as you love one another. You just enjoy your time together and take life as it comes. That's how they lived. Back in the late 1800s, when we were placed on reservations, they were prison camps in the beginning, and this is a situation where we couldn't leave, we were not allowed to hunt. Our knives and guns were taken from us, and we were only allowed to eat whatever the American government gave to us, which was really no good food. The quality of the food was okay when it left places like Chicago and stuff like that, but once it got to some of these train stations between there and the reservation, a lot of these handlers would sell it, and then they would buy old food and put that in there instead, and these middlemen would make a lot of money. Yeah. So what we got on the reservation was bullshit food. Yeah, it was really no good. And we ended up getting all kinds of diseases like heart diseases, hypertension, diabetes, things like that. And then at the same time, our language and ceremonies were declared illegal by the United States. So we were hit physically, spiritually, and emotionally. Soon after that, our minds became weak. And these, as I said earlier, these are the four parts of the South. So with the four parts of the South being sick, we lost our connection to our sacred center. So we started to focus on communicating away from that. And then the priests came from the various churches, and they learned our ways and said that since our ways conflict with the Bible, that our ways are evil, that they come from Satan, they come from the devil. So in our weakened states, we slowly began to accept that. Now, another thing is that there were some Lakota people that didn't want to accept that. They wanted to hang on to the traditional Lakota Star Knowledge ways. And if they revolted, they were sent to a mental hospital in Canton, South Dakota, which was set up for all reluctant Indians in America that did not want to become Christianized. They were sent there. And these church priests also committed the medicine men, medicine women, holy men, holy women. They committed all of them to these mental asylums too. This way, the people would not go to them for help, that they would come to the churches. They wanted the Indian people to only go to the priests and not their traditional healers. So they sent the healers to this mental asylum to die. And if you are radical, you were sent there to die too. Yeah. So
while this is happening, the priests are saying to the Indian people, if you believe our way, we will help your children. And so, there was a very, very dire straits time. And so a lot of Indians became Christians because of that. Like I said, we were weak-minded too at that point. And those who stuck it out, there were people who refused to accept Christianity, but they went to church anyway. What they were doing was they were putting up a candy store front. On the outside, they were acting like good little Christian Indians, but on the inside, they weren't. They were Star Knowledge people. Yeah? They did this because they didn't want to get sent to that mental asylum to die. That's sad, isn't it? But that's part of what happened back then. And it's because of these people who maintained this knowledge in secret. Thanks to them, they passed it down, to certain people like me, and we still have this knowledge. And I have this show, and I'm sharing it with you. Because this regards the sacred center. And we all have that. Yeah, this is not a Lakota thing. This is a Ikche Oyate thing. Ikche Oyate means human being. When you live this way, as I said in the beginning, you communicate as a human, not as a Lakota, not as a German, or a Japanese, or an African. You communicate as a human. Yeah? That's really important to know. So, that's how it was back then. Yeah? Now remember I said that the priest said to the Indians, we will help your children. So, they took the children away from the parents, sent them to boarding school hundreds of miles away, where these children were tortured to speak only English and learn the civilized Christian way. If they spoke about home, they were tortured. These schools didn't do background checks in those days. Yeah, the pay was really low, so they got really no good teachers in these schools. A lot of these teachers were sadistic. They got sexual pleasure from torturing people. And here, this is like summer holiday camp for them. And the same thing for perverts. A lot of perverts now had their pick of the litter. And they could get away with it. That's what happened. A lot of these children were murdered. They were killed. They were raped. They were molested. And there's a lot of unmarked graves near these schools. Not all of these children are accounted for. So, those who made it through, what they learned was whatever they saw. Because a lot of these children never went back home. They were told by the priests that their families had died and that there was nobody there. And that broke their hearts. This is why some of these children, they were so sad they couldn't eat. And they ended up starving themselves to death. And those who made it through, like I said, they didn't really survive because they were not able to process all these emotional traumas that they experienced. They didn't know how, because the only adults that were around them were these unhealthy, abusive people, teachers, dorm matrons, cooks, janitors, priests. They were all unhealthy to them. That's all they knew. They learned how to become victims, and they learned how to become abusers to those who they considered weaker than themselves. So they didn't really survive. A lot of these children that made it through these schools, they had a lot of traumas that they didn't know how to deal with because all they saw was abuse. That's what they learned. There was no adult healthy role models to emulate. I remember I said these children were told that their families were all dead. So they didn't go back during summer holiday. They just stayed at these schools and worked. So when they left these schools, they tried to live in mainstream America. Nobody accepted them. They would say, you're a heathen. You're a dirty Indian. So they couldn't even get jobs off the reservation. And when they went back to the reservation, to their people, they ran into more problems. Many, many times they were not even accepted by their own people because their own people were saying, you're too white. You act like a white man. So they're caught in between. So a lot of them turned to alcohol to try to hide all of it, to try to forget everything. They turned to alcohol and then later drugs. There were some who tried to make it. They married each other because they knew each other went through the same thing. And they didn't want their children to go through what they went through. So they didn't teach them the language. They didn't teach them the culture. Those children, the children of these first generation boarding school people, those children are today's elders. When they were born, they didn't learn the language. They didn't learn Lakota Star knowledge. They never got the opportunity to. When you look at an old person on the reservation today, they're not the connection to the ancient past. No, they were born in a Christian background at a time when the reservations were strongly Christian. So this is what happened. That's a native experience that a lot of people don't realize. This is what happened all over America and Canada too. So the next generation, they are sent to boarding school too. No choice. It's a little bit better, but they're still abused. They're still getting treated really no good. And so they grow up, have children, and they don't teach their children anything. What can they teach them? They don't know anything concerning their own language. This is why today most people cannot speak their own language, and what little cultural information they know is Christianized, meaning it's dualistic, and it's not the original ancient form. Okay, so the first generation of Indian kids that were sent to boarding school, since all around them were unhealthy adults who did nothing but abuse them, they didn't receive healthy parenting. They missed things that they should have learned about life. So they're lacking emotional development. So when they grow up, and those who make it through these boarding schools and then they have children, those children are also lacking that emotional support, that emotional development, because the parents don't know how to do it. Yeah, all they knew and all they learned was abuse. All they experienced in these schools was abuse. So they have a hard time trying to be a healthy parent. So they do the best that they can. But the children still are not receiving the proper emotional development, the experiences that healthy children should receive from healthy parents. They're still missing that. And so when that second generation grows up, they know even less concerning healthy parenting. And so their children receive even less. And every time this happens, the next generation becomes more dualistic than the previous one. So let me try to say that again. The first generation boarding school kids, they didn't receive proper parenting skills. So when they have children, their children are not receiving healthy training that they should be receiving. They're receiving even less than their parents. Now that second generation, when they grow up, see, they know even less. So when they have children, those children are receiving even less, and it gets worse with each generation, which also means that the less healthy emotional development they receive, the more dualistic they become. So with each generation is more becoming emotionally underdeveloped, they're also becoming more dualistic. So today, it's a huge mess on the reservation. We're incredibly, as a whole, we're incredibly underdeveloped emotionally, and we are incredibly dualistic. We're quick to attack each other. We're quick to pull each other down. We're just like the rest of the civilized, dualistic world. Notice I didn't say white man, because this is all over the world. It's not just among white countries. It's all over the world. Wherever there is a dualistic ideology, where one gender is considered less than and property of the other gender, you're going to have incredibly underdeveloped emotional people, which equals incredibly dualistic people. And that is unhealthy. So that started by the time of the late 1800s on the reservation.